Everyone wants to clown Jake Paul after Anthony Joshua, but you're mixing up two things. Jake Paul, the internet character, and Jake Paul standing in front of a heavyweight, a former two-time heavyweight champion who can end your night with one punch. Watch what actually happened, because from my perspective, there was a plan, there was courage, and ultimately, there was a brutal price to pay. So everyone is rushing to have an opinion about Jake Paul's performance against AJ. And I get it. Boxing fans, they have standards, and they should have standards. Standards are important. Boxing fans, they have history, and boxing fans, they have pride, and pride can be a good thing and it can be a bad thing. But having pride in a boxing is a good thing. But most people are missing, I think, a key distinction. They're missing a key distinction. And that distinction is that there's Jake Paul the person, and there is Jake Paul fighting Anthony Joshua. So Jake Paul the person, and then Jake Paul fighting Anthony Joshua. And I would argue that these are not the same conversations. Let me give some context, because when you say Jake Paul is trash, or you say he's no good, you might be talking about the internet character, and I get it. You're talking about, the antics, the noise is deafening, the embarrassing weighings, and I get that. But there's a slight different context when you say Jake Paul did nothing in there, and we're talking about did nothing in the ring with Anthony Joshua, because you're talking about a man standing in front of a former two-time heavyweight champion who can literally switch your lights off with one clean shot. Anthony Joshua is a very good puncher and a very good fighter, a very good boxer. So let's actually try and look at what happened, and let's try and be objective as possible. Of course, we can't be fully objective, but let me tell you from my perspective. Basically, let me tell you what I saw. I saw Jake Paul using his legs to reduce punching opportunities. So legs, they aren't just movement, legs are defense. You're either moving your head or moving your legs. Legs are how you steal seconds from danger. It's how to nullify an opponent's attack zones. I saw a tactic of trying to bait AJ into the right hand. That matters because you don't outbox Anthony Joshua in the traditional sense. You have to try and set traps. If you have any chance, or if Jake Paul had any chance, how minimal it was, you have to create moments and try and tempt AJ to overcommit, to be vulnerable, to present a target for that big right hand. And I saw a moving target, and then a minimal target when AJ got close. So that's not running. That's a person trying to make AJ miss when the range collapses, or when AJ shortens the range with the jabs and with the feints. I also saw something else. I saw a clear plan devised by boxing people, which would have been people in Jake Paul's team. This matters because people talk like Jake Paul is just a YouTuber. So he's just a YouTuber who wandered into the ring. But is that premise entirely true? Because Jake Paul has financial resources, a lot of financial resources, which means he will have good trainers. He has good coaches. He has a good camp. There are professional minds, professional sparring partners, and these professional minds will build a route to giving him a chance to last, to land, and try and make it competitive for as long as possible. Of course, we can call Jake Paul limited. He has no amateur pedigree, and you could argue he hasn't been boxing long enough. You can call it basic. And again, I understand that assertion, but I think it's unfair to call it nothing. And let's talk about the part that people, I'm not saying they're not talking about it, but I find their narrative bias to be interesting. Because in round 5, I saw a man, Jake Paul, take considerable punishment. And his maybe an uncomfortable truth. He could have quit. Considering all the money that he made and considering his antics, he had every right to quit. But he made a choice, and we often do, and he made a choice not to quit. Instead of quitting, he laughed. He took his punishment. And let's be honest, that punishment was brutal. It was extremely brutal. And we're hearing allegedly that he had a broken jaw, he had teeth missing, and allegedly he'll be on liquids for the next 7 days. So it was brutal, that round 5 and round 6. I'm saying allegedly because obviously we don't have the medical reports, but we do know what we saw, or we can have conviction in what he saw. He got hurt and he tried to stay in there. So think of this, at the very least, Jake Paul took his beating with courage. And I think that matters. I think that matters, that he took his beating with courage. You don't have to like him to admit that he took that beating with courage. You don't have to enjoy the act to acknowledge the bravery. Because you can acknowledge the bravery and still condemn the character or condemn the antics, etc. Because bravery is not what you post online. Bravery is staying in there when your body, your physical body, is begging you to leave. Bravery, as I've talked about, which can be courage and heart, is getting up, knowing that you will probably just get battered again. And think of this, that's exactly what happened. And I think Jake Paul deserves a level of respect for that. Now, of course, there's, when we talk about the purses, allegedly, he made over 50 million and he still had the character to get up, only to be battered even further. So I think that deserves some form of respect, because, you could just take the 50 million and just stay down. Now, of course, this is not worship, it's not excuses, it's not rewriting the skill gap, but there certainly is a level of respect. And here's a question that maybe nobody wants to ask in an honest way. Did Jake Paul not respect the sport by taking that beating? Did he not show an element of respect for the sport? Because one of the biggest criticisms of boxing, crossover boxing, is that they're not serious. They're just tourists. I get the analogy. But tourists, in any sense, don't take that kind of punishment and keep going. They don't. Tourists, people that are not passionate about it, about that thing, they will look for an exit. Tourists will find an excuse. Tourists will stay down and just protect the brand. The point is that Jake Paul could have walked away much earlier. He could have walked away much earlier, but he didn't. In the last exchange, Joshua threw a jab to the body and he threw that right hand through the target, not at the target, he threw it through the target. And from my perspective, that punch was very chilling. And that's heavyweight boxing. No matter how famous you are, no matter how much money you have, no matter how rich you are, the punches, they don't care. That 50 million isn't going to block that thunderous right hand through the target from Anthony Joshua. And I guess that's the sobering note. Money does not protect your jaw. Money does not stop your teeth from moving. Money doesn't suffer the physical impact. It might suffer the psychological impact afterwards, but it doesn't suffer the impact in that moment. Jake Paul, in a sense, he got paid for his labor. He got paid very well, but he still had to pay a price. Missing teeth, a broken jaw, a liquid diet for 7 days, allegedly. So think of this. We can at least acknowledge his bravery, the currency of bravery. We can acknowledge that he tried. He really tried with the feints, the movement, and the right hand. And yes, the antics are annoying to people like myself and to boxing enthusiasts parts of the way, and I felt quite embarrassed. But remember this, he's not talking to me. He's not talking to you. He is talking to his audience. It's important to understand why someone is doing something. And that's why the whole narrative of he disrespected boxing, I think fundamentally that's quite lazy. It's intellectually lazy. Disrespect is treating the ring like a joke. Disrespect is quitting when it gets hard. Whatever you think of him, he stepped into the most unforgiving weight class. He did that, and ultimately he accepted the consequences that came with it, publicly in real time. That is the sport, stripped, completely bare. Now, Jake Paul said it himself. He's a businessman first. He's a businessman first. So by his nature, he did what he does, which is business. And he did great business. But once the bell rings, the business stops and the harsh reality of boxing starts. And in that reality, at the very least, he didn't quit. And yes, as I've stated, he tried. And yes, he lost in brutal fashion. But he tried. And I think that counts for something.